One thing I wanted to ask about is I'm really, really interested in the Doom of Valyria. That's something that always grabs me. I'm really into like Doom civilizations. Kind of a two-part question. Is there any certain story of a Doom civilization that inspired that for you? And is it possible that we will ever learn any more about that?
Well, you'll learn a little more about it. I don't think I plan to write a novel about it or anything, but I think every book does a little more. And of course, there's a certain amount of it in the world of Ice and Fire. Have you seen that?
I haven't, but I haven't actually read all of it yet.
What inspired it? There's obviously the Atlantis legends are part of it. A little bit of the destruction of the Minoan civilization, which a lot of people put to a volcanic eruption, and the destruction of this is in relatively recent times, the destruction of the pink and white terraces in New Zealand. Are you familiar with that? That just occurred in the late 19th century. Certain area of New Zealand that was near Rotorua, eighth wonder of the world. These beautiful volcanic terraces. Victorian tourists came and bathed in their waters and so forth, and it was one of New Zealand's biggest tourist attractions until one day the surrounding volcano blew and wiped them off the face of the earth. Of course, in fantasy, you always turn things up to 11, or even better, to 17. And so I took that and Krakatoa and the eruption of Vesuvius and all of these things and turned it up to 11, with a few magical elements and etc. Produced the Doom of Valyria.
Thank you.
Hi, Robert from Newport News, Virginia. Just wanted to ask you about the relationship between the Baratheons and the Lannister and the Targaryens, because I know the foundation of the Baratheons is from Orys, who's half Targaryen, the bastard son. And it seems that when magic goes from the world, the Targaryens, fade, and then when magic and the Baratheons comes to the forefront, and then as magic begins to come back, the Baratheons fade and the Targaryens come to the forefront. So I just wanted to see if you could talk about that a little bit.
That's a good question, a good observation. You're getting a mark.
The Baratheons have a lot of Targaryen blood in them. I mean, not only is the founder of the house himself a bastard kin to Aegon the Dragon, but there were later intermarriages, and most particularly, just a couple generations back, where the Baratheons. So Robert, once you eliminate the main Targaryen line, as they did in Robert's Rebellion, Robert has the best claim to the throne by virtue of his Targaryen blood. So there are ties. The Targaryens married brother to sister and uncle to niece and cousin to cousin, for generations to try to keep their blood pure. But sometimes there were no convenient siblings or cousins around to marry, and they did marry by necessity, or in some cases for political alliances, and in certain cases even for love with some of the other houses of Westeros. So there is Targaryen blood to some extent in not only Baratheons, but in the Dornish and in some of the other houses.
Hi, my name is JD. Thank you again for coming to Mysticon. My question is, with the way you have structured magic in your world and how you just said sometimes stories can have too much magic, how do you decide how fantastical to make your fantastic creatures? Such as you have fire-breathing dragons, yet your manticore is not the human-headed tiger that spits poison barbs, it's a little scorpion.
I don't know. I just, go with what feels right to me. Dragons are cool. And, I can't depart too much with dragons because everyone knows what they are. Manticores, basilisks, we know names, but they're not nearly as well known as dragons, so I have a little more freedom to kind of fool around with them. And there's always this odd thing about fantasy, because Tolkien-esque fantasy where you're dealing with imaginary lands. They may seem like medieval Europe or England, but they're not medieval Europe and England. So you have to decide what feels right. Like, Tolkien, of course, famously had potatoes in the Shire. And, the Shire otherwise seems very much like medieval England. Well, what the hell are potatoes doing there? But he obviously liked his taters, so he has Samwise talking about how you want to make your rabbits with some nice taters or something like that. I have corn in my world, and it's actual American corn. It's maize. It's not. They had the word corn in the ancient times of medieval, but it was just a word for grain. It didn't mean maize. But I like corn, and so I stuck it in. And does it feel wrong? I don't know. Some readers have complained about it. Oh, you shouldn't have corn because it's medieval. Well, it's not medieval England. It's Westeros. Why can't they have corn? They have grain.
You're dropping a Snickers bar out in the middle of the
That's always the question. Yeah, it's a matter of what feels right. Could I have all my characters wearing sneakers? I suppose I could, but that would feel wrong to me. But should I have stirrups on the horses? I know when the stirrup was invented and how it came about in certain periods in history. If you're writing straight historical fiction, you can't have stirrups. But when you're writing fantasy, you can make your decision as to whether you have it or not. So